The smell of antiseptic couldn't mask the scent of desperation in the corridors of Mercy General Hospital. I clutched my mother's test results in trembling hands while the doctor's words echoed in my mind. Without this surgery, she has 6 months, at most. 30 minutes later, I discovered my husband had emptied our joint savings account, $127,000 gone overnight on a high-stakes poker game. I never imagined that 3 years later, he would be standing at my doorstep, begging for help, with tears streaming down his face. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first snowfall of December coated the hospital parking lot in a deceptive blanket of serenity. Through the wide windows of the oncology department waiting room, I watched visitors hurrying inside, their footprints marking dark paths through the pristine white. Inside, the air was heavy with forced warmth and quiet conversations. I'd been sitting in the same vinyl chair for nearly 3 hours, watching the clock tick past appointment times while my mother dozed fitfully beside me. "Rebecca Morgan?" A nurse in dark blue scrubs finally called, her voice echoing against the institutional pale green walls. I gently shook my mother awake. "Mom, they're calling us." She blinked slowly, disoriented in that way that had become increasingly common over the past few months. At 63, Eleanor Morgan had always been the picture of vitality. A middle school English teacher who hiked on weekends and volunteered at the community garden. Now her skin hung loosely on her frame, and the spark in her hazel eyes had dimmed to a faint flicker. "Come on," I whispered, helping her to her feet. "Dr. Abrams is ready for us." The walk to the consultation room felt like a funeral procession. Mom's feet dragged slightly, each step deliberate, as though she were conserving energy for what lay ahead. I'd taken the day off from my job at the architectural firm where I'd worked for the past 8 years, telling my boss I'd make up the hours over the weekend. Truth was, I would have quit on the spot if that's what it took to be here today. Dr. Natalie Abrams was waiting for us, a folder of scan results open on her desk. Unlike the stereotypical clinical detachment, Dr. Abrams had a warmth that made even the worst news feel somehow manageable. Today, though, her smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she gestured for us to sit. "Ms. Morgan, Rebecca." She nodded to each of us in turn. "Thank you for your patience. I wanted to review your latest scans thoroughly before discussing our next steps." Next steps. The phrase hung in the air like a promise. There were still steps to take, paths to follow. That had to be good news. "The tumor has grown since your last scan," Dr. Abrams continued, turning her computer monitor so we could see the ghostly images of my mother's brain. "It's now pressing on areas that control critical functions." My mother nodded stoically, her hands folded in her lap. "Is that why I've been having more headaches? And the trouble finding words sometimes?" "Yes, exactly. The location is challenging. But—" Dr. Abrams paused, seeming to consider her words carefully. "I've consulted with Dr. Ramirez at Cedars Medical Center. He's pioneered a surgical approach that could remove the tumor completely while minimizing damage to surrounding tissue." Hope fluttered in my chest, a cautious bird testing broken wings. "So surgery is an option now? You said before that it was inoperable." "Conventional approaches would be too risky, yes. But Dr. Ramirez has developed a technique specifically for tumors in this location. The success rate is promising. 67% of patients show no recurrence after 5 years. My mother reached for my hand, her fingers cold against mine. "What are the risks?" Dr. Abrams didn't sugarcoat it. "Significant. There's approximately a 15% chance of cognitive impairment and a 5% risk of more severe complications, but without intervention." She didn't need to finish. We'd known for months that the tumor would eventually take my mother's life if left untreated. The only question had been how long and how painful the journey would be. How soon could this happen? I asked, already mentally reorganizing my life around hospital visits and recovery care. Dr. Ramirez has an opening in his surgical schedule in 3 weeks. The procedure and initial recovery would take place at Cedars, with follow-up care here. There's just one other consideration. I knew what was coming before she said it. The cloud that shadows every medical discussion in America. Cedars is out of your insurance network, and Dr. Ramirez's specialized procedure isn't fully covered. Even with your current plan, the out-of-pocket costs would be substantial. How substantial? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Approximately $125,000, including the surgery, hospital stay, and specialized post-operative care. The number slammed into me like a physical blow. Not impossible. Not quite. 2 years ago, Marcus and I had begun saving aggressively for a down payment on a house. With my year-end bonus from the firm and his commissions from the luxury car dealership where he worked as sales manager, we'd managed to accumulate just over $130,000. We'd been weeks away from starting our home search, when Mom's diagnosis had put everything on hold. "We can manage it," I said, squeezing my mother's hand. "I have savings." Mom looked stricken. "Becca, no, that's your house fund, your future with Marcus." "There is no future without you in it," I cut her off gently. "Marcus will understand. Some things matter more than brick and mortar." Dr. Abrams smiled, relief evident in the softening of her expression. "I'll have my office contact Dr. Ramirez today. His team will reach out with pre-surgical protocols and paperwork. In the meantime," she handed me a thick folder, "these are resources for you both. Information about the procedure, what to expect, support groups for families." The drive home was quiet, both of us processing the weight of possibility that now lay before us. Hope was a dangerous thing when you'd prepared yourself for its absence. Mom stared out the window at the snow-covered landscape, occasionally reaching up to massage her temple, another headache building. "You should rest when we get home," I said, turning onto Maple Street where Mom had lived for the past 30 years, first raising me with my father until his death when I was 12, then continuing alone with quiet dignity. The modest 2-bedroom colonial needed work, the roof was nearing the end of its life, and the heating system was temperamental at best, but it was home in the deepest sense of the word. "I need to grade papers," she replied automatically. Despite being on medical leave, she still volunteered at the after-school program twice a week, helping struggling readers improve their skills. Even cancer couldn't completely separate Eleanor Morgan from her calling. "The papers can wait," I insisted, pulling into the driveway. "Doctor's orders, and daughters." A faint smile touched her lips. "When did you become so bossy?" "I learned from the best." Inside, I settled Mom on the living room sofa with a cup of tea and her favorite quilt, the one her mother had made the year I was born. Its blue and purple patches faded from decades of use. I moved around the familiar kitchen preparing a light. Dinner, my mind racing with plans and calculations. I needed to call Marcus. Though we lived together in our apartment across town, our schedules had barely overlapped in recent weeks. His sales position often kept him working late, especially near the end of the month when quotas loomed. He'd been supportive when Mom was first diagnosed, but lately, a distance had grown between us. I'd attributed it to the stress we were both under, him with work, me with Mom's illness and my own demanding job. We'd barely spoken about the house fund in months. It felt like a dream deferred by unspoken mutual agreement. The surgery would change everything. With our savings redirected to Mom's medical expenses, our house plans would be set back by years. But Marcus would understand. He had to. Family came first. That's what he'd said when he proposed 2 years ago, sliding a modest diamond ring across the table at the Italian restaurant where we'd had our first date. I checked the roasted chicken in the oven, then slipped into the hallway to call him, not wanting to disturb Mom, who had finally dozed off on the couch. "Hey, it's me," I said when he answered on the 4th ring. Background noise nearly drowned out his greeting, the sounds of people talking and laughing, glasses clinking. "Are you at work?" "Just finishing up a client meeting," Marcus replied, his voice oddly tight. "Everything okay?" "We got Mom's test results today. There's a specialist who can remove the tumor completely." That's great news, Becca." His enthusiasm sounded forced, setting off a faint alarm in my mind. "It's expensive, about $125,000 after insurance." I told her we'd use the house fund. Silence stretched between us, broken only by the muffled sounds of conversation in the background. When Marcus finally spoke, his voice had dropped to a near whisper. "We need to talk about this in person, not over the phone." The alarm bells grew louder. "What's wrong?" "I thought you'd be on board with this." "It's my mother's life, Marcus." I know. I'll be home later. We'll talk then." He paused, then added, "I love you." But the words sounded hollow, rehearsed. "Love you too," I replied automatically, but he had already hung up. I stood in the hallway, phone clutched. In my hand, a creeping sense of unease spreading through my chest. Something was wrong. I'd expected questions, maybe even some hesitation. $125,000 was no small sum, representing years of careful saving. But not this strange, distant response. After ensuring Mom ate a proper dinner and took her evening medications, I drove back to the apartment I shared with Marcus in Westview Heights. The snow had stopped, but the temperature had dropped, freezing the earlier accumulation into treacherous patches on the roads. By the time I pulled into our assigned parking space, it was after 9 p.m., and Marcus's car was nowhere to be seen. Our apartment was dark and still. I moved through the rooms, turning on lights, the silence amplifying my growing anxiety. On the kitchen counter, bills were stacked neatly beside a half-empty coffee mug from that morning. Everything looked normal, ordinary, except for the absence of Marcus himself. I tried calling him again. This time, it went straight to voicemail. "Marcus, I'm home. Please call me when you get this. We really need to talk about Mom's surgery." Hours passed. I attempted to distract myself with work emails, but my attention kept drifting to the clock, to my silent phone, to the undisturbed welcome mat by our front door. By midnight, concern had crystallized into a cold certainty that something was profoundly wrong. It was nearly 1 a.m. when I heard his key in the lock. I was sitting at the kitchen table, a cold cup of tea beside me, staring at our bank account, login screen on my laptop. I'd been trying to convince myself not to check it, that my suspicions were irrational, born of stress and fear. Marcus stepped into the apartment, surprise registering on his face when he saw me sitting there. He looked disheveled, his normally immaculate appearance rumpled, as though he'd been running his hands through his hair repeatedly. The scent of alcohol followed him into the room. "You're still up," he said, stating the obvious as he set his keys on the counter with deliberate care. "Where have you been? I've been calling." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "My phone died. I was with some clients, then stopped by Jack's place." Jack was his longtime friend and colleague at the dealership. They occasionally went out for drinks after work, but rarely on weeknights, and never without Marcus letting me know first. "What's going on?" I asked directly. "When I mentioned using our savings for Mom's surgery, you completely shut down. Talk to me." Marcus sank into the chair opposite mine, his shoulders slumped in defeat. In the harsh light of our kitchen, I noticed shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there a week ago, a tightness around his mouth that spoke of hidden strain. "I made a mistake, Becca." His voice was barely audible. A terrible mistake. The room seemed to tilt slightly, reality shifting under my feet like unstable ground. "What kind of mistake?" "I took money from our savings. I was going to pay it back before you noticed, before we needed it for the house. I had a system, a sure thing." Ice formed in my veins. "How much, Marcus?" He stared at his hands, now clasped tightly on the table between us. All of it. I took all of it. The words didn't make sense at first, like they were spoken in a language I hadn't quite mastered. All of what? The savings, our house fund. I withdrew it last week. The room went silent except for the rhythmic ticking of the wall clock, a housewarming gift from my mother when we'd moved in 3 years ago. Tick, 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 counting the seconds of this new, altered reality. That's not possible, I finally managed, my voice strange to my own ears. There's $130,000 in that account. You can't just withdraw that kind of money without me knowing. We're both on the account. Marcus finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. I forged your signature on the withdrawal forms. The bank manager knows me, didn't question it. I was going to double it, Becca. Triple it, maybe. I had insider information on a private poker game. High rollers from out of town. Jack's cousin vouched for me to get in. Understanding dawned with horrific clarity. You gambled our savings? Our entire house fund? My voice rose with each word, disbelief giving way to fury. Tell me you didn't lose it. Tell me, Marcus. The answer was, written in the way he flinched, in the tears that now spilled down his cheeks. I thought I had them. My cards were good, great even. The odds were in my favor until the last hand. I just needed one more card. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself, my knuckles turning white with the effort. My mother is dying, Marcus. That money was her only chance. I'll make it right, he pleaded, reaching for my hand. I yanked it away as though his touch would burn me. I'll talk to my father. He can loan us. Your father who's been living on Social Security in that assisted living facility for the past 5 years? I cut him off. The same father who needs your support to make ends meet each month? That father? Marcus had no answer for this, the lie dying before it fully formed. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping across the floor with a harsh sound that matched the scraping pain in my chest. Without conscious thought, I moved to our bedroom, pulled a suitcase from the closet, and began throwing clothes into it, not his but mine. He followed, hovering in the doorway. Becca, please, where are you going? To my mother's. I continued packing, movements mechanical, mind oddly clear despite the chaos unfolding. I need to be with her right now, and I can't be around you. We can fix this, he insisted, voice cracking. I'll take extra shifts at work. I'll sell my car. We can talk to the hospital about payment plans. I paused, a sweater clutched in my hands. Do you understand what you've done? This wasn't just about a house, Marcus. This was my mother's life. Without that surgery, she has 6 months, maybe less if the tumor grows faster than they expect. And now, because of you, because of your gambling, she's going to die. The words hung between us, terrible in their stark truth. I didn't know, he whispered, about your mom's surgery. I swear I didn't know. Would it have mattered? I asked, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. If I had told you last week that we needed the money for mom's surgery, would you have still taken it to that poker game? His silence was answer. Enough. I zipped the suitcase closed with a finality that echoed in the quiet room. As I brushed past him in the doorway, he caught my arm. Please, he said, one last desperate plea. Don't leave like this. We've been together for 5 years. Doesn't that count for something? I looked into the face of the man I'd planned to spend my life with, searching for the person I thought I knew. Instead, I saw a stranger. Someone capable of risking our shared future on the turn of a card. Someone who could jeopardize a dying woman's chance at survival for the thrill of a bet. Yes, I said quietly. It counts for something. It counts for 5 years of my life that I'll never get back. I pulled away from his grasp and walked out of our apartment without looking back, carrying nothing but a hastily packed suitcase and the crushing weight of betrayal. Outside, the frozen world matched the numbness spreading through me. A bitter cold that seemed to reach beyond skin and bone to freeze the very core of who I was and what I believed about love, trust, and the person I'd chosen to build a life with. As I drove through the silent, snow-covered streets toward my mother's house, only one thought kept repeating in my mind. I had just lost everything. The man I loved, the future we'd planned, and now, most devastating of all, the precious time I might have had left with my mother. The breaking point wasn't just the end of my relationship with Marcus. It was the shattering of my entire world, with no clear path to put the pieces back together again. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Morning arrived at my mother's house with cruel indifference to the wreckage of my life. I'd spent what remained of the night curled on the living room sofa, drifting in and out of restless sleep, my mind cycling through impossible scenarios to raise $125,000 in 3 weeks. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw the surgeon's hands moving, away from my mother, shaking his head with regret as the opportunity slipped beyond reach. I rose before dawn, making coffee in the kitchen where I'd spent my childhood. Mom's old percolator still sat on the counter, a relic she refused to replace. Despite my numerous attempts to gift her something more modern, some things get better with age, she'd always say, a gentle reminder that newer wasn't always improved. By the time she shuffled into the kitchen at 7, wrapped in her faded blue robe, I'd already made 3 phone calls, to my boss requesting emergency personal leave, to our family doctor asking for less expensive treatment alternatives, and to the hospital's financial assistance department. None had yielded solutions, only sympathetic platitudes and promises to look into options. "You're up early," Mom observed, easing herself into a chair at the small breakfast table. Her movements were cautious, deliberate, as though her body had become fragile glass overnight. "And you brought a suitcase. What's happened?" I poured her coffee, buying a few seconds to compose my thoughts. How could I possibly tell her that her life now hung in the balance because my husband had a gambling problem I'd never even known about? "Marcus and I had a fight," I said finally, settling on the most manageable piece of truth. I needed some space to think. She studied me over the rim of her mug, teacher's eyes missing nothing. "Must have been quite a fight to bring you here at—" She glanced at the clock. What I'm guessing was 1 in the morning. I busied myself with making toast, keeping my back to her. "It's complicated. Nothing for you to worry about right now." "Rebecca Jean Morgan," she said, using my full name as she had whenever I tried to hide something as a child. "In 35 years, I've never known you to run from a problem. What's really going on?" The bread popped up from the toaster, startling me. I placed it on a plate, hands trembling slightly as I spread butter in precise, even strokes. When I finally turned to face her, the concern in her eyes nearly undid me. "The surgery," I began, my voice hardly more than a whisper. "The money we talked about yesterday." Understanding dawned on her face. "Marcus doesn't want to use your savings." If only it were that simple. I set the plate before her and took the opposite chair, forcing myself to meet her gaze. "The money's gone, Mom?" "All of it." Her hand froze halfway to her coffee mug. "What do you mean gone?" The entire story spilled out of me then. Marcus's late-night confession, the high-stakes poker game, the forged signature, everything. With each detail, my mother's expression shifted from shock to disbelief to a quiet anger I'd rarely seen. "Oh, Becca," she breathed when I finished. "I'm so sorry." "I'm the one who should be apologizing," I said, fighting back tears. "If I'd known what he was doing—" "Stop right there." Her voice regained some of its classroom authority. "This is not your fault." You didn't make Marcus gamble away your savings. That was his choice, his failure, not yours. But now we can't afford your surgery. The words felt like glass in my throat. And without it? I've had a good life, she interrupted, reaching across the table to take my hand. 63 years. I raised an amazing daughter. I touched hundreds of young lives through teaching. If this is where my story ends, then no. I pulled my hand away, anger suddenly burning through the fog of despair. This is not where your story ends. I'm going to find a way to pay for that surgery if it's the last thing I do. She smiled sadly. Becca, $125,000 doesn't just materialize out of thin air. Even if you liquidated every asset you have, then I'll get more assets. I stood abruptly, energy coursing through me. I'll work 3 jobs. I'll sell the car. I'll take out loans. There has to be a way. My mother watched me with a mixture of pride and sorrow. You've always been so stubborn. Just like your father. The mention of my dad, gone 12 years now from a heart attack that came without warning one ordinary Tuesday, brought a fresh wave of determination. He would have moved mountains to save her. I could do no less. I'm going to make some calls, I said, reaching for my phone. There are options we haven't explored yet. The day that followed became a blur of phone calls, internet searches, and increasingly desperate calculations. I reached out to distant relatives, old college friends, even a former boss who had always spoken highly of my work. By noon, I had cobbled together promises totaling $17,000, a fraction of what we needed, but a start. I called Dr. Abrams's office, explaining our situation and asking about payment plans. The sympathetic nurse who took my call promised to have the financial counselor contact me, but warned that most specialized surgeries required at least 50% payment up front. Have you considered a medical fundraising campaign? She suggested gently. Many patients find success with online platforms. The idea hadn't occurred to me. Within an hour, I had created profiles on 3 different crowdfunding sites, writing and rewriting my mother's story until every word felt like it might carry the weight of her life. I shared the links on every social media platform I belonged to, swallowing my pride as I laid our desperate situation bare for friends, acquaintances, and strangers to see. By evening, donations had begun trickling in. $25 here, $100 there, accompanied by messages of support and shared stories of medical struggles. A high school friend pledged $500. My cousin in Arizona contributed $1,000. My boss surprised me with a company donation of $5,000, calling it an advance against future work. The running total climbed steadily throughout the night. $8,000, $12,000, $15,000. It was both heartwarming and heartbreaking, evidence of human generosity that nonetheless fell far short of our goal. At this rate, we might reach $30,000 before the surgery date, not even a quarter of what we needed. I was scrolling through community assistance programs on my laptop when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Marcus's name flashed on the screen. I had ignored his previous 5 calls and numerous text messages, but something, perhaps sheer exhaustion, made me answer this one. What do you want? My voice sounded brittle even to my own ears. Becca, please, Marcus began, his words tumbling over one another. I've been going crazy wondering if you're okay. Can we talk? In person? I'm staying at my mother's. I have nothing to say to you right now. I've been making calls all day, he continued, as though I hadn't spoken. My boss agreed to an advance against commissions. It's not much, only $12,000, but it's something. And I'm listing my car with the dealership tomorrow. The equity should be another $18,000 or so. A flicker of hope warred with lingering anger. $30,000 is still less than a quarter of what we need. I know, but I've got other ideas. Jack knows someone at Riverside Credit Union who might approve a personal loan despite our despite my situation. And my father's offered to sign over his life insurance policy if it helps secure financing. I pressed my fingers against my temple, where a headache had been building all day. You told your father? I had to, Becca. I needed his help. His voice cracked slightly. He was disappointed, of course, but mostly worried about Eleanor. About both of you. My throat tightened. Walter, Marcus's father, had always been kind to me, treating me like the daughter he never had. The thought of him learning about his son's betrayal was another layer of pain I hadn't anticipated. I've made such a mess of everything, Marcus continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. But I swear I'm going to make it right, somehow. Part of me wanted to believe him. The larger part remembered the casual ease with which he'd lied about where he was the night before, how readily he'd risked our future on a game of cards. I need to go, I said, unable to process this unexpected olive branch. Mom needs her medication. Becca, wait. I ended the call, setting the phone face down, on the coffee table as though it might bite. Outside the living room window, night had fallen, the street lamps casting pools of yellow light onto the snow-covered sidewalk. In one of those pools, a neighbor walked her elderly golden retriever, their breath visible in the cold air. Such ordinary moments continuing while my world imploded seemed almost offensive in its normalcy. My mother appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame. Was that Marcus? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She crossed the room slowly and lowered herself onto the sofa beside me. What did he want? To help, supposedly. He says he can raise about $30,000. She was quiet for a moment, considering. That's a start. A drop in the bucket, I corrected, closing my laptop with more force than necessary. We need 4 times that amount. Becca. She placed her hand on mine, her touch feather-light but insistent. Look at me. I turned reluctantly, bracing for another speech about accepting fate or finding peace with whatever outcome awaited us. I want you to listen carefully, she said instead, her voice carrying the same quiet authority that had commanded classrooms for decades. The money matters. Of course it does. But what matters more is that you don't let this situation destroy you. I'm fine, I insisted automatically. No, you're not. You're angry and hurt and terrified, and you have every right to be. But I've watched you make call after call today, reaching out to people you haven't spoken to in years, creating those fundraising pages, working yourself to exhaustion. You're pouring everything you have into saving me. Because I need you, I admitted, the simple truth of it burning my throat. And I need you to survive this, whatever this turns out to be. She squeezed my hand gently. If the worst happens, if we can't raise the money and I don't make it, I need to know that you'll be okay. That you won't let bitterness consume. You won't. Don't talk like that, I pleaded. We're going to find a way. I hope so. I want more time. With you, with my students, with this beautiful, messy world. But if that's not in the cards, promise me you'll find a way forward. Promise me you won't let hatred for Marcus or anger at the situation define the rest of your life. The request seemed impossible, unfair. How could I promise to forgive the unforgivable? To move forward if I lost her to a death that money we had once had, could have prevented? I can't think about that right now, I said finally. All I can focus on is finding a solution. She seemed about to press the issue, then nodded slightly, recognizing the limits of what I could process. Then let's think about solutions together. What haven't we tried yet? We spent the next hour reviewing options, most of which I'd already explored and found wanting. Personal loans were limited by income and credit score. Medical credit cards carried exorbitant interest rates and wouldn't cover the full amount. Retirement accounts, what little I had, included severe penalties for early withdrawal. What about the house? Mom suggested suddenly. It's fully paid off. Has been since your father died. The insurance took care of the mortgage. I stared at her, comprehension slowly dawning. You want to take out a home equity loan? Or sell it outright? It's just a house, Becca. 4 walls and a roof. It's served its purpose. This is your home, I protested. All your memories with Dad, with me, are in here, she tapped her temple, not in the drywall or the floorboards. Besides, if the surgery works, I'll need somewhere smaller anyway, less maintenance, and if it doesn't... She trailed off, leaving the implication hanging between us. The practical logic of it was undeniable, yet the emotional cost seemed too high. This house had been our anchor through every storm. My father's death, my college struggles, even my engagement to Marcus had been celebrated in the backyard garden my dad had planted. Let me look into it, I conceded finally, but only as a last resort. She nodded, seemingly satisfied with this compromise. Now I think we both need some rest. Tomorrow will be another day of phone calls and planning, I imagine. As I helped her up the stairs to her bedroom, each step slow and deliberate, the weight of our situation pressed down like a physical presence. My mother, the woman who had taught me to read, to stand up for myself, to find wonder in even the darkest moments, was now leaning on me both literally and figuratively. The reversal of roles felt premature, wrong in a way I couldn't fully articulate. Once she was settled in bed, I returned downstairs, too restless for sleep despite my exhaustion. My phone had accumulated 6 new notifications, 3 donations, to the fundraising page totaling $850, 2 text messages from Marcus with links to medical financing options, and 1 voicemail from a number I didn't recognize. I played the voicemail first, expecting perhaps another distant relative or friend responding to my increasingly desperate social media pleas. Instead, a professional female voice filled the room. This message is for Rebecca Morgan. My name is Diane Winters from the Community Care Foundation. One of our board members saw your mother's story on the crowdfunding site and brought it to our attention. We'd like to discuss possible assistance options with you. Please call our office tomorrow, between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. I replayed the message twice, afraid to hope yet unable to stop the tiny flame that flickered to life within me. I hadn't heard of the Community Care Foundation, but a quick internet search revealed it to be a legitimate nonprofit that provided grants for medical treatments not covered by traditional insurance. For the first time since learning of Marcus's betrayal, I felt something other than despair. It wasn't quite hope, not yet, but perhaps its distant cousin. Possibility. As I finally made my way to the guest room that had once been mine, I caught sight of myself in the hallway mirror. The woman who stared back looked older somehow, the past 24 hours having etched new lines around her eyes and mouth. But there was something else there too, a determination that bordered on ferocity, a silent promise that this was not the end of our story. Whatever came next, whether triumph or heartbreak, I would face it standing, not just for my mother's sake, but for my own. At precisely 9:01 the next morning, I called the Community Care Foundation. My fingers trembled slightly as I dialed, hope and fear warring within me. After 2 rings, the same professional voice from the voicemail answered. Community Care Foundation, this is Diane Winters speaking. Hello, Ms. Winters. This is Rebecca Morgan returning your call about my mother, Eleanor Morgan. Ms. Morgan, thank you for calling back so promptly. Her tone warmed slightly. As I mentioned in my message, one of our board members came across your fundraising campaign for your mother's surgery. The situation caught our attention because Dr. Ramirez is actually affiliated with our foundation as a consulting physician. My heart skipped a beat. Does that mean you might be able to help with the surgical costs? Potentially, yes. The foundation has a specialized program for patients seeking innovative surgical interventions that aren't fully covered by insurance. Your mother's case appears to qualify based on the preliminary information we have. I gripped the phone tighter, afraid to breathe lest this lifeline somehow slip away. That would be incredible. What do we need to do? I've emailed you our application forms. We'll need your mother's complete medical records, financial documentation, and a personal statement describing her situation. Once we receive everything, our medical review board can make a determination within 48 hours. And if approved, what kind of assistance might be available? I asked, trying to temper my expectations. Our grants typically cover between 50 and 70% of qualifying medical expenses, depending on financial need and the specific treatment protocol. Even at the lower end, that would mean $62,500, half of what we needed. Combined. With what Marcus claimed he could raise and our crowdfunding efforts, we might actually reach the full amount. Thank you, Ms. Winters. I'll complete the application immediately. One more thing, Ms. Morgan, she added before I could end the call. Dr. Ramirez has a cancellation in his surgical schedule. If your mother is approved, he could potentially perform the procedure next Friday instead of waiting 3 weeks. The timeline shift sent a jolt of both hope and anxiety through me. Sooner was better medically, but it compressed our already tight fundraising window even further. I understand. We'll be ready. After hanging up, I immediately called Dr. Abrams' office to request expedited medical records, then spent the next 3 hours meticulously completing the Foundation's application. Every question seemed to carry the weight of my mother's life, each answer a plea for the chance to save her. Mom sat beside me at the kitchen table, providing information when needed, but mostly watching me with a mixture of gratitude and concern. You don't have to do all this alone, she said gently as I massaged my cramping hand. Marcus called again. While you were on the phone earlier, he wants to help with the paperwork. I stiffened at the mention of his name. I've got it handled. Becca. She covered my hand with hers. I know you're angry with him. You have every right to be. But this isn't about Marcus or your marriage right now. It's about marshaling every resource we can. The logical part of me knew she was right. The wounded part couldn't bear the thought of depending on the man who had created this crisis in the first place. Let me think about it, I conceded reluctantly. Right now, I need to finish this application. By early afternoon, I had submitted everything to the Community Care Foundation and was scrolling through my crowdfunding page, responding to well-wishers and updating the total raised, now just over $32,000 including offline pledges. Encouraging, but still far from our goal. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from Jack, Marcus's friend from the dealership. We had always gotten along well, though we weren't close enough for him to be calling me directly. Curiosity overrode my hesitation. Jack, is everything okay? Hey, Rebecca. His normally boisterous voice sounded subdued. I wanted to call you myself about Marcus. My stomach clenched. What about him? He collapsed at work this morning. They took him to Mercy General. The world seemed to tilt sideways for a moment. Despite everything, the news hit me with unexpected force. What happened? Is he... He's stable, Jack quickly assured me. Exhaustion and dehydration, mostly. Doctor says he hasn't been sleeping or eating properly. Been working himself into the ground trying to raise money. I closed my eyes, conflicting emotions washing over me. Concern for Marcus battled with the bitter thought that his current state was a consequence of his own actions. Yet another part of me recognized the desperation driving him. The same desperation that had kept me up until 3 a.m. researching medical grants. I'm sorry to hear that, I said finally, unsure what else to offer. Look, I know things are rough between you two right now, Jack continued. And I'm not defending what he did. It was stupid and selfish and he knows it. But he's killing himself trying to make it right. And that's supposed to make everything better? The words came out sharper than intended. No, of course not. Jack sighed heavily. But there's something else you should know. The dealership is organizing a charity car wash this weekend, all proceeds going to your mom's surgery fund. It was Marcus's idea, but everyone's on board. We've got commitments from about 30 employees and their families already. The unexpected gesture caught me off guard. A car wash and a barbecue, silent auction, the works. The owners donating the use of the main lot and matching whatever we raise. The local news picked up the story this morning. They're sending a crew to cover it. Why would they do all that? I asked, genuinely bewildered. Because your mother was everyone's favorite English teacher, Jack replied simply. Half the sales team had her in middle school, including me. She's the reason I can string together a coherent sentence when talking to customers. Memories surfaced of the numerous times Mom had mentioned running into former students around town, at the grocery store, the bank, the community theater. I had never fully appreciated how many lives she had touched during her decades of teaching. I don't know what to say. Say you'll come, Jack suggested. Not for Marcus, if you're not ready for that, but for your mom, and for all the people who want to help. After ending the call, I sat motionless at the kitchen table, processing this unexpected development. The community rallying around my mother moved me deeply. The thought of Marcus working himself to the point of collapse stirred more complicated feelings I wasn't ready to examine. My reflections were interrupted by a knock at the front door. Opening it, I found myself face to face with Lydia Chen, my mother's next-door neighbor for the past 15 years. Rebecca, dear, she greeted me, pressing a casserole dish into my hands. I made Eleanor's favorite chicken and rice. How is she today? About the same, I replied, accepting the dish. Gratefully. The rich aroma reminded me I hadn't eaten since yesterday's toast. Thank you for thinking of us. Of course. She hesitated, then added, I saw your online fundraiser. My book club has been spreading the word. We're all so fond of your mother. I blinked back unexpected tears. That means a lot to us, Lydia. Actually, that's part of why I'm here. My son works for Channel 7 News. They're doing a segment on community fundraising efforts, and he thought your mother's story might fit well. Would you be interested in an interview? It could help spread the word further. The idea of putting our private struggle on public display made me instinctively uncomfortable. Yet, hadn't I already done exactly that with the online fundraiser? If more exposure meant more donations. When would they want to do this? Tomorrow morning, if possible. They could come here, make it easier on Eleanor. I nodded slowly. Let me discuss it with her, but tentatively yes. Thank you. After Lydia left, I found Mom dozing in her reading chair, an open novel resting on her lap. The sight sent a pang through my heart, such an ordinary moment that might become precious memory all too soon if we couldn't secure the surgery. I gently touched her shoulder. Mom? Lydia brought dinner. And there's something I need to discuss. With you. She stirred, blinking away sleep. What time is it? Almost 5. You've been napping for a couple of hours. These medications make me so drowsy. She straightened, marking her place in the book. What did you want to discuss? I explained Lydia's news proposal, along with Jack's call about the dealership fundraiser. Her eyes widened as I detailed the community response gathering momentum around us. All this for me? She whispered, clearly overwhelmed. People love you, Mom. You've spent your life giving to others. Now they want to give back. She shook her head slightly, tears gathering in her eyes. I never expected. So you're okay with the news interview? And attending the fundraiser? This weekend? If it helps, yes. Though I'm not sure how photogenic I'll be these days. She attempted a small joke, gesturing to her thinning hair and pallid complexion. You're beautiful, I said fiercely, and brave and beloved. That's what people will see. That evening, as Mom rested upstairs, I found myself drawn to the family photo albums stored in the living room cabinet. Flipping through pages of memories, my childhood birthdays, family vacations, school performances, I was struck by how often my mother appeared behind the camera rather than in front of it, always documenting others' moments, rarely claiming the spotlight for herself. In one faded photograph, she stood beside my father outside their first apartment, both impossibly young and smiling, with the endless optimism of people who believed the future held only good things. They couldn't have known then that cancer would claim him 30 years later, or that the same disease would threaten her now. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Being discharged tomorrow. Jack told me about the news interview. I can help. Prepare talking points if you want. PR was my minor in college, remember? I did remember. Just as I remembered 1,000 other details about the man I had planned to spend my life with. How he took his coffee, black with 1 sugar, his irrational fear of geese after being chased by one as a child, the way he hummed unconsciously while folding laundry, all the small intimacies that made up a shared life, now tainted by his betrayal. But my mother's words echoed in my mind. This isn't about Marcus or your marriage right now. It's about marshaling every resource we can. After a long moment, I typed back, send me what you have. And Marcus, take care of yourself. You can't help if you're in the hospital. It wasn't forgiveness. I wasn't ready for that. But perhaps it was the first tentative step toward something else. Pragmatic cooperation for a cause greater than our broken relationship. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. The news crew arrived promptly at 10, transforming our modest living room into an impromptu studio with portable lights and microphones. The young reporter, Lydia's son Michael, conducted the interview with surprising sensitivity, allowing Mom to tell her story in her own words while gently guiding the narrative toward the community fundraising efforts. Mrs. Morgan, you taught middle school English for over 30 years here in Lakeside, he noted. Did you ever imagine your former students would rally around you like this? Mom smiled, some of her old spark visible despite her weakened state. Teachers plant seeds never knowing which ones will grow, or when. I'm humbled to discover so. Many took root. Throughout the interview, I sat just off camera, ready to step in if Mom grew tired. But she seemed energized by the conversation, speaking eloquently about education, community, and the importance of human connection in difficult times. When Michael asked about the upcoming fundraiser at Riverside Motors, I found myself unexpectedly emotional. It speaks to the kind of community Lakeside is, I managed. People coming together for someone who made a difference in their lives. My mother always taught me that we rise by lifting others. Now others are lifting her. After the crew packed up, promising the segment would air that evening, Mom reached for my hand. Thank you, she said simply. For what? For fighting? So hard. For believing this is possible when it would be easier to accept defeat. I squeezed her fingers gently. Giving up has never been the Morgan way. No, she agreed with a small smile. Your father used to say we were too stubborn for our own good. He wasn't wrong. As if summoned by our conversation, my phone rang with an unknown number. I answered to find Diane Winters from the Community Care Foundation on the line. Ms. Morgan, I'm calling with news about your application. My heart thundered in my chest. Yes? The Medical Review Board has evaluated your mother's case, and I'm pleased to inform you that she has been approved for financial assistance. The room seemed to tilt momentarily, relief making me lightheaded. That's wonderful news. Thank you so much. The foundation will cover 60% of the surgical and immediate post-operative costs, approximately $75,000 based on Dr. Ramirez's estimate. I quickly calculated in my head. With the fundraising efforts and Marcus's contributions, we were now within striking distance of the full amount. When can we schedule the procedure? I asked, already mentally reorganizing our timeline. Dr. Ramirez can accommodate your mother next Friday as mentioned. His office will contact you directly to arrange pre-surgical testing. There's just one more thing. Yes? The board was particularly moved by your mother's story and her impact on the community. They've asked if she would be willing to participate in our annual donor recognition event later this year, health permitting, of course. Her experience could inspire others to support the foundation's work. I glanced at Mom, who was watching me intently, trying to discern the nature of the call from my expressions. I believe she would be honored, but let me confirm with her. After ending the call and sharing the news, I watched as my mother absorbed the reality that surgery, and the possibility of more time, was now within reach. "It's really happening," she whispered, her voice caught between wonder and apprehension. "It really is." I sat beside her on the sofa, suddenly overwhelmed by the swift change in our circumstances. Just 3 days ago, I had discovered Marcus's betrayal and believed all hope was lost. Now, through a convergence of community generosity, institutional support, and relentless effort, we had found a path forward. The realization brought with it a surprising clarity. In crisis, we discover not only who we are, but who stands beside us when everything falls apart. My mother had built a legacy of impact that was now returning to support her in her hour of need. The question remaining was whether I could find the strength to include Marcus in that circle of support. Not for his sake, but for the greater purpose of saving my mother's life. As if reading my thoughts, Mom said gently, "You should call him. Let him know." I nodded, knowing she was right. Whatever lay ahead for us personally, Marcus deserved to know his efforts had contributed to this outcome. The call I was about to make wouldn't erase the past or guarantee the future, but it would acknowledge the present reality. Sometimes healing begins with the recognition that we're all capable of both terrible mistakes and meaningful redemption. With this thought, I picked up my phone and dialed his number, stepping into the uncertain space between what was and what might yet be. "Rebecca." Marcus's voice came through the phone with a mixture of surprise and cautious hope. "I didn't expect to hear from you so soon." I stood in my mother's backyard, watching as the late afternoon sun filtered through the bare branches of the old maple tree my father had planted the year I was born. The winter air bit at my cheeks, but I welcomed the sharp clarity it brought. "I have news," I said, keeping my voice level. "The Community Care Foundation approved Mom's application. They're covering 60% of the surgery costs." The line went silent for a moment, then I heard what sounded like a stifled sob. That's incredible. When did you find out?" "About an hour ago. Dr. Ramirez can perform the surgery." "Next Friday." "Next Friday? That's so soon. Is that good or bad?" "Good, medically speaking. The sooner they can relieve the pressure on her brain, the better her chances for a full recovery. But financially, we're still on a tight timeline," he observed, shifting seamlessly into problem-solving mode. "How much do we still need to raise?" The word "we" hung between us, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to address. Nevertheless, I found myself answering. "With the Foundation's contribution, the fundraising page, and what you said you could pull together, we're still about $20,000 short. The dealership event this weekend should help with that. We've already got commitments from several big clients who want to donate, and the local business association is spreading the word." Despite myself, I felt a flicker of gratitude. While nothing could erase what Marcus had done, his efforts to help now were undeniable. "Jack mentioned you were in the hospital," I said, changing the subject. "How are you feeling?" "Embarrassed, mostly. Turns out you can't survive on coffee and adrenaline indefinitely." He attempted a weak laugh. "The doctor says I'm fine. Just need to actually eat and sleep occasionally." "You should listen to him." "I will." He paused. "Becca, about the fundraiser this weekend." "I'll be there," I said, anticipating his question. "Mom wants to attend too, if she's feeling up to it. Her doctor says it's fine as long as she doesn't overexert herself." That would be amazing. Having her there will really drive home what we're all working for. Another awkward silence stretched between us, filled with all the things we weren't saying. The betrayal, the uncertain future of our relationship, the complex tangle of feelings that couldn't be resolved in a single conversation, or perhaps ever. I should go, I said finally. Mom's resting, and I need to make some calls about the pre-surgical testing schedule. Of course. And Rebecca? Yes? Thank you for calling, for letting me be part of this. After hanging up, I remained in the yard, watching my breath form clouds in the cold air. The conversation had been easier than expected, focused on practical matters rather than emotional wounds. Perhaps that was the only way forward for now, building a fragile bridge of shared purpose over the chasm that had opened between us. When I returned inside, I found Mom awake and sitting at the kitchen table, a steaming mug of tea before her and a pile of cards scattered across the surface. "What's all this?" I asked, hanging my coat on the hook by the back door. "They started arriving this morning," she explained, gesturing to the colorful array. "Get well cards, mostly. Some from former students, others from neighbors and friends. Word travels fast in a small town." I picked up one of the cards, adorned with a watercolor painting of wildflowers. Inside, a neatly printed message read, "Ms. Morgan, you taught me to find beauty in words when I couldn't find it anywhere else. Now it's our turn to give back. Wishing you strength and healing. Sarah Jenkins, class of 2007. "Sarah Jenkins," Mom said, noting which card I'd selected. "Brilliant writer, painfully shy. Struggled with depression throughout middle school. She's a published poet now." I set the card down, marveling at how my mother could recall such specific details about a student from 15 years ago. "You really did make a difference." "I tried," she said simply. "Teaching was never just about grammar and literature for me. It was about seeing each child, really seeing them, and helping them find their voice." Her words struck a chord. Throughout this crisis, I had been so focused on the medical and financial aspects that I'd nearly lost sight of why it mattered so much to save her. Not just because she was my mother, but because the world was better with her in it. I spoke. "With Marcus," I said, taking the seat across from her. "He's being discharged from the hospital tomorrow." She nodded, studying my face. "How did it go?" "Surprisingly civil. We mostly talked about the fundraiser and next steps for your surgery. And the other things? The harder things?" I sighed, tracing the wood grain of the table with my fingertip. "Those will have to wait. Right now, getting you through surgery is all that matters." "Becca," her voice carried that gentle but firm tone I'd known all my life. "Your life doesn't pause while mine is in crisis. The hurt, the betrayal, the decision about your marriage, those things are still happening whether we acknowledge them or not." "I know that," I admitted. "But I can only fight one battle at a time, and yours is the priority right now." She reached across the table to cover my hand with hers. "Just promise me you won't use my situation as an excuse to avoid dealing with yours. Whatever you decide about Marcus, whether to forgive him or walk away, make that choice because it's right for you, not because you're too exhausted to face it." Before I could respond, my phone rang with a call from Dr. Ramirez's office, launching us into a flurry of scheduling pre-surgical appointments and tests. The conversation with my mother lingered unfinished, her wisdom hanging in the air, like the scent of her tea, subtle but persistent. The next 2 days passed in a whirlwind of activity. Mom underwent preliminary blood work and imaging studies to prepare for the upcoming surgery. I coordinated with the foundation about payment arrangements and finalized details for the weekend fundraiser. Our online campaign continued to grow, boosted by the local news segment featuring Mom's story, which had aired Wednesday evening and been shared widely on social media. By Friday afternoon, as we prepared to attend the dealership event the following day, The total funds raised stood at just over $95,000. Impressive progress, but still short of our goal. The pressure of the approaching surgery date weighed heavily, a constant presence in the back of my mind as I helped Mom select an outfit for tomorrow's appearance. The green sweater, she decided, pulling a soft cashmere cardigan from her closet. Your father always said it brought out my eyes. I nodded, throat suddenly tight with emotion. This modest selection process, choosing clothes for a public appearance, carried the weight of hope. 6 months ago, before her diagnosis, such an ordinary moment would have passed without notice. Now it felt precious, a small act of faith, in a future we were fighting to secure. The doorbell rang, interrupting our preparations. When I answered, I found Lydia on the porch, holding a glossy folder. Rebecca, dear, I hope I'm not interrupting. She glanced over my shoulder toward the stairs. Is Eleanor resting? She's awake, just choosing an outfit for tomorrow. Would you like to come in? Lydia stepped inside, removing her gloves as she entered the warm hallway. I wanted to drop this off before the event tomorrow. My women's group at church put it together. She handed me the folder. Inside, I found a professionally printed program for what appeared to be a benefit concert titled Notes for Eleanor, a Musical Evening in Support of Eleanor Morgan. What is this? I asked, scanning. The details. According to the program, the Lakeside Community Choir and Orchestra were presenting a special performance next Wednesday at the high school auditorium, with all proceeds going to our cause. After the news segment aired, Pastor Williams suggested, we organize something quickly, Lydia explained. Eleanor used to volunteer with the choir before she got sick, you know. They were eager to help. I stared at the program, overwhelmed once again by the community's response. Lydia, this is incredible. I don't know how to thank you. No thanks needed. We're hoping to sell out the auditorium. That would be about $15,000 in ticket sales. And we'll have donation stations set up throughout the venue. The missing piece. If the concert succeeded and the dealership event went as planned, we might actually reach our goal in time for the surgery. Who's at the door? Mom called from the top of the stairs, one hand gripping the railing for support. It's Lydia, I replied, moving quickly to help her descend. She brought something you need to see. As Mom reviewed the concert program, tears welled in her eyes. The Mozart Requiem, she murmured, noting the featured piece. That was what was playing when Richard and I had our first date. Lydia nodded. I remembered you mentioning that at choir practice years ago. The director thought it would be a fitting centerpiece. After Lydia departed, promising to return tomorrow to drive us to the dealership event, Mom and I sat in the living room surrounded by cards and well wishes from the community. The concert program lay open on the coffee table between us, a tangible reminder of the unexpected support system that had materialized around us. I keep thinking about what you said to that reporter, Mom reflected, about people lifting others. I never expected to be on the receiving end like this. That's because you've spent your life giving, not taking, I replied. It feels uncomfortable to need help. Yes, she sighed, leaning back against the cushions. There's a certain vulnerability in accepting other people's generosity. It requires admitting you can't do everything alone. Her words resonated beyond her own situation, striking at something fundamental in my approach to the current crisis, and perhaps to life itself. Since Marcus's betrayal, I had withdrawn into a fortress of self-reliance, determined to solve everything without depending on anyone who might hurt or disappoint. Me again. Yet here we were, surrounded by evidence that connection, not isolation, was our path forward. I've been thinking about something, Mom continued, her gaze steady on mine. If the surgery is successful, when it's successful, things will change. I'll need recovery time, possibly rehabilitation depending on how the procedure affects my motor skills and cognition. I know. I've been researching post-operative care options. There are some excellent facilities. I don't want a facility, she interrupted gently. At least not immediately. I'd like to recover at home with help. I nodded, already mentally rearranging my schedule to accommodate her needs. Of course, I can take family leave from work. The firm has been incredibly understanding so far. That's not what I meant. She hesitated, then continued carefully. I received a text from Marcus yesterday. He offered to help with my recovery, driving me to appointments, assisting with physical therapy exercises, whatever might be needed. Surprise and wariness collided within me. He contacted you directly? Don't be upset with him. I think he was trying to find a way to contribute that wouldn't pressure you or complicate things further. The thought of Marcus inserting himself into our daily lives during Mom's recovery stirred conflicting emotions. On one hand, the practical assistance would be valuable. My leave from work couldn't last indefinitely, and managing her care alone would eventually become overwhelming. On the other hand, his presence would force me to navigate our fractured relationship while also supporting Mom through a challenging recovery. You don't have to decide now, Mom said, noting my silence. I just wanted you to know the offer exists. And Rebecca? Her voice softened. Whatever happened with the money, and I'm not minimizing how serious that was, Marcus is not a villain in a story. He's a flawed human who made a terrible mistake, just as we all have at some point. Gambling away our life savings is a bit beyond a normal human error, I countered, an edge creeping into my voice. Perhaps, but you're going to need to decide soon whether that mistake defines him entirely in your eyes or whether there's anything worth salvaging. She reached for my hand. Not for my sake, but for yours. Carrying anger is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. Her wisdom cut through my defenses, exposing the truth I'd been avoiding. At some point, I would need to face the future of my relationship with Marcus directly, not just through the lens of this medical crisis. The realization was both daunting and oddly liberating, a reminder that beyond the immediate struggle for Mom's survival lay the broader question of how I would rebuild my own life from the rubble of betrayal. As twilight settled over the neighborhood, casting long shadows across the living room floor, I found myself standing at a crossroads of sorts. To my left lay the path of righteous anger and isolation, protecting my wounded heart at the cost of deeper connection. To my right, the uncertain journey toward forgiveness, not forgetting or excusing what had happened, but perhaps finding a way to move forward without being defined by it. The choice wasn't one I needed to make tonight, but as I helped Mom back, upstairs to rest before tomorrow's event, I felt something shift within me, a small opening in the wall I had built around my heart, letting in the possibility that healing might come in unexpected forms, through unexpected people, including perhaps the very person who had caused the wound in the first place. Saturday morning dawned clear and unseasonably warm for December, as if the weather itself had decided to support our cause. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as I prepared breakfast for Mom, who had slept better than she had in weeks, perhaps buoyed by the recent developments and growing hope. The doctor said small portions, I reminded her as she eyed the modest plate of scrambled eggs and toast I placed before her. We don't want to upset your stomach before today's event. I know. She smiled, reaching for her medication. I'm just grateful to have an appetite at all. Those first rounds of treatment took that away completely. I watched her eat, noting with relief that some color had returned to her cheeks. Whether from improved rest, reduced stress, or simply the promise of potential healing, she appeared stronger today. The change was subtle, but significant, a visual reminder of what we were fighting for. My phone buzzed with a text from Lydia, coming by at 11:30, bringing Ellen from church to help Eleanor get ready. Don't worry about lunch, the ladies' auxiliary is handling food at the event. The dealership fundraiser was scheduled to run from noon until 6 p.m., with Mom making a brief appearance around 2 o'clock. Dr. Abrams had advised limiting her public exposure to an hour at most, concerned about fatigue and potential exposure to germs so close to surgery. "The cavalry arrives in an hour," I told Mom, showing her the message. "Apparently you're getting the full glam squad treatment." She laughed, a sound I hadn't heard enough lately. "Ellen was a hairdresser for 40 years before retiring. She'll probably try to talk me into something dramatic. She's been suggesting a pixie cut since we joined the choir together." "Well, given that you're about to lose some hair to surgery anyway, maybe now's the time to experiment." I kept my tone light, though the reference to her upcoming procedure sent a familiar ripple of anxiety through me. Mom must have sensed my momentary tension. "It's going to be okay, you know," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. "Whatever happens, with the surgery, with Marcus, with everything, we'll face it together." "I know." I squeezed back, drawing strength from her certainty. "I'm just ready for this part to be over. The fundraising, the waiting, the constant calculations. I want to move on to the healing." "We will." She nodded toward the window, where sparrows gathered at the bird feeder hanging from the maple. "Life has seasons, Becca. This is our winter. Dormant, challenging, sometimes bitter. But spring always follows, even when it seems impossible." Her philosophical perspective reminded me of the English teacher who had inspired generations of students, able to find meaning and metaphor even in the darkest circumstances. It was this quality, perhaps more than any other, that made her so beloved by her students and the community surrounding us now. By the time Lydia arrived with Ellen, an energetic woman in her 70s with impeccably dyed auburn hair, Mom had dressed in slacks and a blouse, saving the green sweater for the main event. "Eleanor Morgan," Ellen declared upon entering, hands on her hips as she assessed my mother with a professional eye. "You're looking far too serious for a woman about to be the guest of honor. Let's add some color to those cheeks and do something about this lovely hair of yours." I left them to their preparations, using the time to check our fundraising totals and respond to messages that had accumulated overnight. The online campaign had surged following the news segment, now standing at just over $42,000. Combined with Marcus's contributions, the foundation grant, and other pledges, we had reached approximately $105,000, tantalizingly close to our goal, with today's event and the upcoming concert still to come. For the first time since this crisis began, I allowed myself to fully believe we would succeed. The realization brought tears to my eyes, a release of tension I hadn't realized I was holding. We were going to make it. Mom would get her surgery. She had a fighting chance. My phone rang, jolting me from my thoughts. The screen displayed Dr. Ramirez's office number, sending my momentarily settled nerves back into high alert. "Hello, this is Rebecca Morgan." "Ms. Morgan, this is Alicia." From Dr. Ramirez's surgical team. The woman's voice was professional but warm. "I'm calling with an update about your mother's procedure next Friday." "Is everything all right?" I asked, immediately concerned. "Yes, but there's been a change in the schedule. Dr. Ramirez has been asked to present at an emergency medical conference in Boston on Thursday and Friday. Rather than postpone your mother's surgery, he'd like to move it forward to Wednesday morning." Wednesday, just 4 days from now and the same day as the benefit concert. The timeline compression made me dizzy. "Is that safe? Moving it up?" I managed. "Absolutely. All of Mrs. Morgan's preliminary tests have been completed, and the results are favorable. Dr. Ramirez actually believes sooner is better in her case, given the tumor's location and growth rate." "What about the payment timeline?" I asked mentally, calculating whether we could secure the remaining funds by Tuesday. "The foundation has already transferred their portion, and Dr. Ramirez understands your fundraising efforts are ongoing. As long as you can provide proof of the additional funds by Wednesday morning, whether through pledges or actual transfers, the surgery can proceed as scheduled." After confirming the new details and ending the call, I sat motionless at the kitchen table, processing this latest development. The accelerated timeline was medically beneficial, but added enormous pressure to our fundraising efforts. Today's event and the concert, which would now coincide with the surgery itself, had suddenly become even more critical. I was still absorbing this news when Ellen led Mom into the kitchen with a flourish. "Presenting the new and improved Eleanor Morgan." Mom looked transformed. Ellen had styled her thinning hair into a becoming soft wave that framed her face, applied subtle makeup that brightened her complexion, and even added a touch of pale pink lipstick that complemented her natural coloring. The overall effect was remarkable. She looked more like herself than she had in months. "You look beautiful," I said, genuinely moved. "Amazing what a bit of blush and some clever styling can do," Mom replied with characteristic modesty, though I could tell she was pleased. "What's wrong? You look worried." I shared the news about the surgery's rescheduling, watching her face carefully for signs of increased anxiety. Instead, I saw a flicker of relief. "Sooner is better," she said, echoing the doctor's assessment. "I've been ready to get this thing out of my head since the day they found it. But the fundraising will happen as it happens," she finished firmly. "Today we focus on this event. Tomorrow we'll worry about Wednesday." Her calm acceptance steadied me. If she could face accelerated brain surgery with such equanimity, surely I could handle the logistics surrounding it. Lydia's sedan pulled into the driveway precisely at 11:30. The drive to Riverside Motors took us through the heart of Lakeside, where I noticed several businesses displaying signs promoting both today's fundraiser and Wednesday's concert. Seeing Mom's name in such public support still felt surreal, a private struggle now embraced by the wider community. As we approached the dealership, my breath caught at the scene before us. The massive lot, normally filled with gleaming new vehicles, had been transformed into a festival-like atmosphere. Colorful canopies dotted the space, volunteers in matching blue t-shirts bustled between stations, and a large banner stretched across the entrance proclaimed, "Healing for Eleanor, Community Fundraiser." A local radio station had set up a remote broadcast booth, and the parking areas surrounding the dealership overflowed with cars. "Oh my," Mom whispered, taking in the spectacle. "All this for me?" "Looks like half the town turned out," Lydia remarked, searching for a place to park in the crowded lot. My phone buzzed with a text from Jack. "We're ready for Eleanor whenever you arrive. VIP entrance at the side door. Already raised $8,000 in the first hour." The news sent a surge of hope through me. At this rate, we might reach our goal before the day was over. Once parked, we made our way toward the side entrance Jack had mentioned. Volunteers nodded respectfully as we passed, several reaching out to touch Mom's arm or shoulder in wordless support. The gesture reminded me of religious processions I'd seen in other cultures, a community physically connecting with someone they viewed as important to their collective identity. Jack met us at the door, his normally jovial face solemn with emotion as he greeted Mom. "Ms. Morgan, it's an honor to have you here. You probably don't remember me, but I was in your 7th grade class in 1998. Worst speller you ever had, you used to say." Mom studied him for a moment, then smiled with genuine recognition. "Jack Hernandez, you wrote a remarkable essay about your grandfather's immigration journey. I still quote from it when teaching about personal narrative." His face lit up. "You remember that?" Of course. It was honest and raw in a way that most 12-year-olds can't manage. "I always wondered if you'd become a writer." Jack laughed. "Not quite. But I did learn that telling a compelling story helps sell cars, so those writing lessons weren't wasted." He guided us into a quiet office area within the dealership, where a comfortable chair awaited Mom. "We've set up a rest station for you. Here, the owner's suite, best air conditioning in the building and a private bathroom. When you're ready, we'll take you out to say hello to everyone. but you can retreat here whenever you need a break. The thoughtfulness of the arrangement touched me deeply. These people weren't just raising money. They were taking care to protect Mom's dignity and comfort throughout the process. "Thank you," I said, emotion making my voice husky. "This is incredible, Jack. All of it." "Don't thank me." He gestured toward the window overlooking the main lot. "This was all Marcus. He's been here since 5 a.m. setting everything up, making sure every detail was perfect for Ms. Morgan." The mention of Marcus sent a complicated ripple through me. Part of me longed to see him, to witness firsthand the efforts he was making. Another part feared the encounter, uncertain whether it would strengthen my resolve to move forward independently or weaken my defenses against premature forgiveness. "Where is he now?" I asked, striving for a neutral tone. "Running the auction." "Table. We've got some big-ticket items. Vacation packages, sports memorabilia, that sort of thing." Jack hesitated. "He's been asking about you both all morning, but he wanted to give you space, let you decide if and when you want to talk." The consideration behind that decision, not pushing, not centering himself in today's events, revealed a sensitivity I wouldn't have expected from the man who had so recklessly gambled away our future. "I'll find him later," I said, making a decision I hadn't realized I'd been considering. "After Mom's had a chance to greet people." Jack nodded, then checked his watch. "The news crew is arriving at 2 p.m. for Ms. Morgan's appearance. I should go make sure everything's ready. Make yourselves comfortable, and let any of the staff know if you need anything at all." After he left, Mom settled into the plush chair with a small sigh of relief. "It's all a bit overwhelming, isn't it? The scale of this." "In the best possible way," I agreed, adjusting a pillow behind her back. "How are you feeling?" "Truthfully, tired but determined," she replied, "and grateful beyond words. Seeing all these people come together." She gestured toward the window, where crowds continued to grow outside. "It restores your faith in humanity." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. In the darkest moment of our lives, when all seemed lost, an entire community had materialized around us, transforming an individual crisis into a collective cause. The cynical part of me might once have questioned whether such genuine goodness still existed in our often divided world. Now I had my answer, written across a dealership lot filled with people who cared enough to show up. As we waited for Mom's scheduled appearance, I stepped out briefly to survey the event. The atmosphere was festive despite the serious purpose. Children laughed as volunteers painted their faces. A local band played upbeat tunes from a small stage, and the air carried the mingled scents of barbecue, popcorn, and the first hint of approaching rain. My attention was drawn to a large display board near the center of the lot, covered with photographs spanning decades. Mom in her early teaching days with students from the 1980s. More recent images of her at school events, community theater productions she had helped direct, library reading programs she had organized. Someone had created a visual timeline of her impact on Lakeside, accompanied by handwritten notes from former students and colleagues. Standing before this testament to a life well lived, I felt a profound shift in perspective. This wasn't just about saving my mother's life, though that remained the urgent, primary goal. It was about honoring the ripple effects of one person's dedication to others, the immeasurable value of quiet, consistent service that might otherwise go uncelebrated. And somewhere in that realization lay a challenge for my own life. What legacy was I creating? When crisis struck someone I loved in the future, would there be a community ready to rally around them because of connections I had fostered, lives I had touched? The question lingered as I made my way back to Mom, carrying with it both inspiration and a gentle conviction that whatever path I chose after this crisis passed, it needed to extend beyond my own immediate circle into the wider world where such bonds were forged. The gathering crowd outside, united by compassion and common purpose, wasn't just raising funds for a medical procedure. They were demonstrating a truth too easily forgotten in our individualistic society. We are designed to carry each other through the impossible moments, to transform your problem into our challenge, and in doing so, to discover that our capacity for impact is far greater together than it could ever be alone. At precisely 2 p.m., Jack appeared at the office door with Michael Chen from Channel 7 News and a camera operator in tow. The young reporter's face brightened when he saw Mom. "Mrs. Morgan, you look wonderful," he said, genuine warmth in his voice. "Are you ready for your moment in the spotlight?" "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied, smoothing her cardigan. "Though I must admit, this is all rather more attention than I'm accustomed to." "You're doing Lakeside proud," Michael assured. The response to your story has been overwhelming. Our station has received dozens of calls asking how people can help." Jack gestured toward the main entrance. "We've set up a small podium near the front. Just a brief appearance, a few words if you feel up to it, then we'll bring you right back here to rest." I helped Mom to her feet, noting how she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin. The same posture I had seen her adopt countless times before entering her classroom, a physical manifestation of the dignity and presence that had commanded respect from generations of students. As we stepped outside, the bustling crowd fell silent, then erupted into applause. The sea of faces turned toward us, some familiar, many unknown, all united in purpose. Several people wiped away tears as Mom made her way slowly to the podium, leaning on my arm. From this vantage point, I could fully appreciate the scale of the event. Hundreds of people filled the dealership lot, gathered around auction tables, food stations, and activity booths. A large digital display near the entrance showed the running fundraising total, $16,125 and climbing. At the podium, Mom gazed out at the assembled crowd, visibly moved by the turnout. When she spoke, her voice carried the same clear authority that had guided countless literature discussions and grammar lessons, though perhaps softer now with emotion. "I hardly know what to say," she began, "except thank you. In 35 years of teaching in this community, I tried to instill in my students that words matter, that they have power to change lives, to open doors, to heal wounds. Today, I find myself without adequate words to express what this means to me." She paused, collecting herself as a murmur of encouragement rippled through the crowd. "When I was diagnosed, I thought my story was ending. What I'm seeing today reminds me that our stories are never just our own. They're woven together, chapter by chapter, with the stories of everyone whose lives touch ours." Her gaze swept across the gathering, and I noticed her focus briefly on a point near the back of the crowd. Following her line of sight, I spotted Marcus standing slightly apart, watching with an expression of such naked emotion that I had to look away. "Whatever happens next in my story," Mom continued, "I want you all to know that this chapter, this demonstration of community and compassion, will be one I treasure most. Thank you for reminding me and my daughter that no one faces their darkest moments alone in Lakeside." The applause that followed was thunderous, punctuated by cheers and whistles. As Jack helped Mom back toward the office, people reached out to touch her hand, offer words of encouragement, or simply be near her for a moment. I followed a few steps behind, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. Once Mom was settled back in the comfortable chair, Jack approached me with a notepad. "We just tallied the auction results so far. Combined with direct donations and the car wash proceeds, we're at nearly $22,000, and we've still got 4 hours to go." The news ignited a fresh spark of hope. "That's incredible, Jack. With the concert on Wednesday, we might actually reach our goal in time." "About that," Jack said, lowering his voice, "Marcus wanted me to tell you there's been a major donation pledge. One of his high-end clients, guy who buys a new luxury car every year, heard about Eleanor and committed $10,000 on one condition." "What condition?" I asked, immediately wary. He wants to present the check personally at the concert. Apparently, his mother was also an English teacher, and Eleanor's story resonated with him. I nodded, relieved that the stipulation was simple. Of course, that would be wonderful. Great, I'll let Marcus know. Jack hesitated, then added, he's been asking if you'd speak with him, just for a few minutes. The request sent a flutter of anxiety through me. Throughout the event, I had been aware of Marcus's presence, catching glimpses of him directing volunteers, speaking with donors, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Each sighting had stirred complicated emotions I'd managed to hold at bay by focusing on Mom. Where is he? I asked finally. Near the auction area, helping pack up the items that have been claimed. Tell him I'll meet him there in a few minutes. After checking that Mom was comfortable with Lydia keeping her company, I made my way through the crowd toward the auction tables. Several people stopped me to offer well wishes or share stories about Mom, delaying my progress. By the time I reached the auction area, Marcus was nowhere to be seen. He had to step away to handle an issue with one of the food vendors, a volunteer, explained when I asked. Said he'd be back in about 20 minutes. Part of me was relieved at the reprieve, while another part recognized it as merely postponing the inevitable. Marcus and I would need to talk eventually, not just about logistics for the fundraiser or Mom's care, but about the broken pieces of our relationship lying between us like shattered glass. As I turned to head back to Mom, heavy raindrops began to fall from the suddenly darkened sky. The weather forecast had mentioned possible afternoon thunderstorms, but the morning's clear skies had made it easy to dismiss the warning. Now, looking at the ominous clouds gathering overhead, I realized we might be in for a significant downpour. Event staff sprang into action, directing people toward covered areas and securing items that might be damaged by rain. I quickened my pace, concerned about getting Mom back to the car before the worst of the storm hit. Lydia met me halfway, expression worried. The radio is saying this could be quite severe, possible lightning and high winds. We should get Eleanor home now. Agreed, I said, scanning the rapidly clearing lot. Where's Jack? We need to thank him before we leave. Already taken care of. Eleanor insisted on writing a personal note while you were gone. Lydia gestured toward the parking area. I've brought the car around to the side entrance to keep her from getting wet. We hurried back to the office where Mom waited, already wearing her coat. Perfect timing, she said as we entered. I was just starting to feel like I might need a nap. The drive home was tense, with rain now falling in sheets that reduced visibility to mere yards. Lydia navigated carefully, both hands gripping the wheel as wind buffeted the sedan. By the time we pulled into Mom's driveway, small rivers were forming along the curbs, and thunder rumbled ominously in the distance. You should stay until this passes, Mom told Lydia once we were safely inside. The forecast said it might last through the evening. Lydia agreed readily, helping me settle Mom on the living room sofa with a warm blanket. I'll make some tea, she offered, heading for the kitchen. I sat beside Mom, noting the fatigue evident in the slight tremor of her hands and the shadows beneath her eyes. The excitement and emotion of the day had clearly taken a toll, though she was making an effort to hide it. You should rest, I said gently. It's been a big day. In a minute, she replied, her gaze drifting to the window where rain lashed against the glass. I keep thinking about all those people who came today, standing in the cold to support me, and now this storm, she sighed. I hope it doesn't ruin the event. Jack said they were prepared for weather. Most of the important activities were under canopies or inside the showroom. I squeezed her hand. Besides, they already raised more than we expected. It's been a tremendous success. She nodded, but her expression remained troubled. Did you speak with Marcus? Not yet. We kept missing each other. The admission felt like a half-truth, though technically accurate. There will be time for that later. Mom studied my face with the perceptive gaze that had always seen through my childhood attempts at evasion. "You're still angry." "Not angry exactly," I said after a moment's reflection. "More cautious. I recognize the effort he's making, but that doesn't erase what happened." "No, it doesn't," she agreed. "Nothing can change the past. The question is whether you're willing to consider a future that includes him in some capacity." Before I could respond, my phone rang with a call from Jack. I excused myself and stepped into the hallway to answer. "Rebecca, thank goodness," he said, his voice tight with stress. "Is Eleanor safe at home?" "Yes, we left about 20 minutes ago. Why? What's wrong?" "The storm's gotten much worse. We've had to shut down the outdoor portion of the event completely." A section of the main canopy collapsed. No injuries, thankfully, but it was a close call. "That's terrible," I said, genuinely disappointed that the promising fundraiser had been curtailed. "What about the indoor activities?" "Still going, but attendance has dropped significantly. People are heading home before the roads get worse." He paused. "But that's not why I'm calling. It's Marcus." My heart rate quickened. "What about him?" "He was helping secure equipment when the canopy started to give way. He managed to get everyone clear, but he was hit by one of the support poles. They've taken him to Mercy General. I'm headed there now." The world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. "How bad is it?" "Not sure yet. He was conscious but in a lot of pain. Possible broken ribs, maybe a concussion. The paramedics were concerned enough to transport him immediately." "I'll meet you there," I said without hesitation, surprising myself with the immediacy of the decision. After explaining the situation to Mom and Lydia, assuring them I would call with updates, I grabbed my coat and car keys. Mom caught my hand as I leaned down to kiss her goodbye. "Be careful on the roads," she said. "And Rebecca? Remember what matters." The drive to Mercy General was harrowing, with visibility reduced to mere feet in some stretches and several roads partially flooded. The normally 20-minute journey took nearly 40, each minute stretching my nerves tighter as I imagined Marcus lying injured, perhaps seriously, while I battled through the storm to reach him. The irony wasn't lost on me, rushing to the aid of the man whose actions had caused such pain, feeling genuine fear for his well-being despite the unresolved anger simmering beneath the surface. Human emotions rarely followed logical paths, especially when entangled with years of shared history and the complex web of love, betrayal, and tentative redemption. By the time I reached the hospital, the emergency department was bustling with activity. Storm-related injuries, from minor cuts to more serious trauma, had created a steady stream of patients. I spotted Jack in the waiting area, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, shirt still damp from the rain. "Any news?" I asked, approaching him. He looked up, relief evident in his expression. "They're taking him for x-rays now. The doctor said he definitely has 2 broken ribs and a pretty nasty head laceration, but they're more concerned about possible internal bleeding." "What happened exactly?" I sank into the chair beside him, suddenly aware of how tightly wound my body had become during the drive. The wind caught the canopy from underneath. Everyone saw it starting to go and scattered, but Marcus noticed one of the volunteers, a high school kid, frozen in place. He pushed the kid clear, right as the whole thing came down. Jack ran, a hand through his damp hair. If he hadn't acted so quickly, that teenager might have been seriously hurt, maybe worse. The description matched what I knew of Marcus. Impulsive at times, but never hesitating when others needed help. It was one of the qualities that had drawn me to him initially, his instinctive willingness to put himself on the line for others. The same quality, I realized with a pang, that had driven his frantic efforts to raise money for Mom's surgery after his catastrophic mistake. "Family of Marcus Wells?" A nurse appeared in the waiting area doorway, clipboard in hand. I stood, momentarily uncertain whether I still qualified as family, given our current limbo. Jack nudged me forward. Go. He'd want you there. Following the nurse through swinging doors into the treatment area, I steeled myself for what I might find. The last time I had seen Marcus had been from a distance at the fundraiser, looking capable and in control as he directed volunteers. The contrast with his current state might be jarring. The nurse led me to a curtained bay where Marcus lay on a hospital bed, eyes closed, an oxygen cannula in his nose and monitors attached to his chest. A bandage covered part of his forehead, and his normally tan complexion had taken on an alarming grayish tone. "Marcus?" I said softly, approaching the bedside. His eyes fluttered open, taking a moment to focus on my face. When recognition dawned, a mixture of surprise and relief washed over his features. "Becca," he whispered, voice raspy. "You came." Something in his tone, the unveiled wonder that I would be there, as if my presence was an unexpected gift rather than an obligation, cracked, open a sealed chamber in my heart. Whatever had happened between us, whatever might happen in the future, in this moment we were simply two people who had once promised to care for each other through better or worse. "Of course I came," I replied, taking his hand gently, mindful of the IV inserted in his forearm. "Jack called and told me what happened. You scared a lot of people today." A ghost of his familiar smile flickered across his face. "Including myself. Turns out metal poles hurt quite a bit when they fall on you." "So I've heard." I pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat, still holding his hand. "The doctor's concerned about internal bleeding?" He nodded slightly, wincing at the movement. "They're waiting on CT scan results. Apparently my blood pressure keeps dropping, which they don't love." The clinical description of his condition, delivered with forced casualness, couldn't mask the fear underneath. I recognized it because I'd been living with a similar fear for months, the lurking awareness of mortality that accompanied serious medical concerns. "You're in good hands," I assured him, echoing the phrase so many had offered about Mom's care. "Mercy General has an excellent trauma team." He squeezed my fingers weakly. "I'm sorry about the fundraiser. We were doing so well before the storm hit." "Don't worry about that now. Jack said you'd already raised over $22,000. That's extraordinary." "Not enough," he murmured, eyelids growing heavy. "Not enough to fix what I broke." The naked vulnerability in his words struck me deeply. Beyond the physical injuries, beyond the immediate crisis, lay the deeper wound he carried, the knowledge that his actions had jeopardized my mother's life and shattered the trust between us. Before I could respond, a doctor entered the curtained area, tablet in hand. "Mr. Wells, I have your scan results. You have a grade 2 splenic laceration, essentially a tear in your spleen that's causing some internal bleeding." My grip on Marcus's hand tightened involuntarily. "Is that serious?" "It requires close monitoring, but we can often manage this type of injury non-surgically," the doctor explained. "We'll be admitting him to the ICU for observation over the next 24 to 48 hours. If the bleeding continues or his condition deteriorates, we may need to intervene surgically." Marcus closed his eyes briefly, absorbing this information. "What about the fundraiser on Wednesday?" "Eleanor's concert. I need to be there." The doctor's expression grew stern. "Mr. Wells, you've sustained significant trauma. Even in the best-case scenario, you'll need rest and careful monitoring for at least a week. Attending any event on Wednesday would be out of the question." After the doctor left to arrange the admission, Marcus turned to me, distress evident in his eyes despite the pain medication beginning to cloud them. "I promised I'd be there. The donor with the $10,000 check, he's expecting me to introduce him." "I'll handle it," I assured him. "Jack can help coordinate everything. Your only job right now is to rest and heal." He seemed about to argue, then relented, the fight draining from him as the medication took stronger hold. "I was hoping to see you at the dealership," he murmured, voice growing fainter. Kept looking for you in the crowd. I know. I was looking for you too. The admission came easier than I expected. Are we going to be okay, Becca? He asked, words slurring slightly as he drifted toward sleep. Not just the money for Eleanor. Us. Are we going to find a way through this? The question hung between us, weighted with everything we hadn't yet addressed. The betrayal, the broken trust, the uncertain future. In the sterile hospital room, with rain lashing against the windows and Marcus's monitors beeping a steady rhythm, simple answers felt inadequate. I don't know, I said honestly. But I'm here now, and we'll figure out the next steps together, one day at a time. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was an opening. A willingness to consider possibilities beyond the sharp dividing line of that terrible night when everything had fallen apart. Whether that opening would lead to reconciliation, or merely a more compassionate separation remained to be seen. As Marcus drifted into medicated sleep, his features relaxing from their pained tension, I remained by his bedside, watching the rise and fall of his chest. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but within the hospital walls, something had shifted. Not a resolution, but perhaps the first fragile foundation for whatever might come next. In the midst of all this uncertainty, one truth emerged with unexpected clarity. Life rarely offered clean divisions between heroes and villains, between those who deserved compassion and those who did not. Instead, it presented complex, flawed individuals capable of both terrible mistakes and remarkable courage, sometimes within the same heart, sometimes within the same day. My mother's surgery was still our most pressing concern. The fundraising effort still critically important. But sitting beside Marcus's hospital bed, I realized that my own healing, separate from Mom's physical recovery, would require grappling with this messy, complicated truth about human nature. And perhaps that reckoning, whenever I was ready to fully embrace it, would be its own kind of surgery, painful but necessary, removing what was broken to make space for something new to grow. Sunday morning found me stretched uncomfortably across a vinyl recliner in the ICU waiting room, having spent most of the night alternating between dozing fitfully and checking on Marcus. The hospital staff had been kind enough to bend visitation rules, allowing me brief moments at his bedside throughout the night as they monitored his condition. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed clean world glittering with raindrops and fallen branches. My phone battery had died hours ago, leaving me temporarily disconnected from updates about Mom and the fundraiser aftermath. The isolation created a strange bubble of suspended time where nothing existed beyond. The hospital's sterile corridors and the rhythmic beeping of Marcus's monitors. A gentle hand on my shoulder roused me from half-sleep. I looked up to find an ICU nurse standing over me, her expression compassionate but professional. Ms. Morgan, Mr. Wells is asking for you. His vital signs have stabilized overnight and the doctor just completed morning rounds. I straightened, wincing as stiff muscles protested. Is he going to be okay? The bleeding appears to have slowed significantly, which is exactly what we hope to see. If this trend continues, he'll likely avoid surgery. She gestured toward the unit entrance. He's much more alert this morning, and quite concerned about you sleeping out here all night. Following her through the security doors, I found Marcus propped up slightly in the hospital bed, his complexion markedly improved from the gray pallor of the previous evening. The oxygen cannula remained in place, but several of the monitoring leads had been removed, suggesting progress. You stayed? He said as I approached, his voice stronger than before, though still weighted with pain. Of course I did. I took the chair beside his bed, suddenly self-conscious about my rumpled appearance and the emotional implications of my overnight vigil. The doctor says you're doing better. He nodded cautiously, mindful of his injuries. The bleeding slowing down on its own, If it continues this way, they might move me to a regular room later today. That's wonderful news. An awkward silence fell between us, heavier for the intimate setting of the hospital room and the unspoken questions hanging in the air. Why had I stayed? What did it mean for us? Where did we go from here? Marcus broke the tension first. You should go home, get some real rest. Check on Eleanor. I'm not going anywhere. I will, soon. I hesitated, then added, but first, we should talk about Wednesday. The concert. His expression clouded. I'm sorry I won't be there. We'll manage, I assured him. But I need information about the donor with the big check, about any arrangements you've made that I should know about. He shifted slightly, grimacing at the movement. There's a folder in my office at the dealership labeled Eleanor's Concert. Everything's in there. Contact information for the donor, the program timeline, everything. Jack can get it for you. I'll call him as soon as I charge my phone. Marcus reached for the water cup on his bedside table, wincing with the effort. I automatically moved to help him, holding the straw steady as he took a careful sip. Thank you, he said, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that went beyond the simple assistance. Not just for this, for being here at all. After everything. Marcus, I began, unsure what would follow. No, please let me say this while I have the clarity. He drew a careful breath. Seeing you walk into this room last night was more than I deserved. I know that. What I did with our savings was unforgivable, especially once I knew what it was needed for. Then why did you do it? The question had burned within me for days, yet I had never directly asked it until now. He held my gaze, though shame colored his features. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of not being enough. The admission seemed to physically pain him more than his injuries. The dealership had been struggling for months. I was missing sales targets, watching newer guys outperform me. Some clients I'd worked with for years were going elsewhere. I started to feel obsolete. I sat back, processing this. In all our conversations about finances and future plans, he had never once mentioned struggling at work. Why didn't you tell me? Pride. Stupid, destructive pride. His voice caught. You were thriving at your firm, getting recognition, moving up. I didn't want to be the failure in our relationship. So when Jack's cousin mentioned this high-stakes game with a buy-in that could potentially solve everything overnight, you thought you'd win, fix the problem before I ever knew it existed. I finished for him, the pieces finally aligning. He nodded miserably. I convinced myself it was a calculated risk, not a desperate gamble. That I was protecting our future, not jeopardizing it. The explanation wasn't a justification, nothing could justify what he'd done, but it offered a window into his thinking that I had been missing. The Marcus I'd known wasn't a habitual gambler or reckless spender. He'd always been methodical, with money, careful with investments. This catastrophic choice had seemed so out of character precisely because it was born from a perfect storm of insecurity, pride, and misguided attempts to solve a problem alone. I wish you'd talk to me, I said finally. We could have faced your work challenges together, found a solution that didn't risk everything. I know that now. He closed his eyes briefly, exhaustion evident. The irony is that after losing our savings, I finally started being honest with my boss about the challenges I was facing. He connected me with mentors, adjusted my client portfolio to better match my strengths. Things were just starting to improve when Mom got sick and the money was suddenly needed for something far more important than a house down payment. He nodded, eyes glistening. By then, it was too late. The damage was done. The monitors tracked his heart rate increasing slightly, with emotion. Concerned about his condition, I placed a gentle hand on his arm. You should rest. We can talk more about this later. Just one more thing, he insisted. Whatever happens between us, whether you decide to give me another chance or walk away completely, I want you to know I'm committed to helping Eleanor. Not to win you back, but because it's the right thing to do. Because I respect and care about her. Because the only way I can live with myself after what I did is to do everything possible to fix it. The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable, a raw honesty that couldn't be faked. For the first time since discovering his betrayal, I felt something inside me shift. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps the first step toward understanding. I believe you, I said simply. The relief in his expression was palpable. He relaxed, against the pillows, the tension draining from his features. You should go check on her, and Rebecca, take care of yourself too. You can't keep running on empty. The role reversal struck me. Marcus, injured and hospitalized, expressing concern for my well-being. Perhaps we were both growing through this crisis in ways neither of us had anticipated. After ensuring he was comfortable and promising to return, later, I made my way out of the ICU. In the main lobby, I found a charging station for my phone and waited the necessary minutes for it to power up. Immediately, notifications flooded the screen. Missed calls from Lydia, texts from Jack updating the fundraiser total, now approaching $25,000 despite the premature ending, and a voicemail from Dr. Abrams requesting I call her office as soon as possible. The last notification sent a spike of anxiety through me. Calling the doctor back immediately, I was relieved when her nurse assured me it wasn't an emergency. Dr. Abrams simply wanted to discuss final preparations for Wednesday's surgery and ensure all financial arrangements were proceeding as planned. Next, I called Lydia, who had stayed the night with Mom to avoid driving home in the storm. She reported that Mom had slept well and was enjoying a light breakfast while reading the Sunday paper. She's been asking about you, Lydia said. And about Marcus after I mentioned Jack had called with news of the accident. Tell her I'm on my way home, I replied. Marcus is doing better. No surgery needed, they think. I'll fill her in on everything when I get there. My final call was to Jack, explaining Marcus's request for the folder from his office. Jack promised to retrieve it immediately and bring it to Mom's house later that afternoon. How's he doing? Jack asked, genuine concern in his voice. Better than expected. They're monitoring him closely, but the internal bleeding is slowing. That's a relief. He paused. Listen, Rebecca, I know this is a weird time to bring this up, but there's something you should know about Marcus and the fundraising. What about it? That $10,000 donor? It's not actually a client. Marcus arranged for a personal loan using his car as collateral. He was going to surprise everyone by presenting it as a donation at the concert. The revelation stunned me. He was going further into debt? After everything that's happened? He was desperate to make things right, Jack said simply. And he knew time was running out. After ending the call, I sat in the hospital lobby, processing this new information. The image of Marcus secretly taking on significant debt to contribute to Mom's surgery fund was difficult to reconcile with the man who had gambled away our savings on a poker game. Yet both actions stemmed from the same impulsive desire to solve problems independently, for better or worse. By the time I arrived back at Mom's house, exhaustion had settled into my bones, making each step up the front walkway feel like wading through wet cement. Lydia met me at the door, coat in hand. Perfect timing, she said, voice low. Eleanor's resting in her room. There's fresh coffee in the kitchen, and I've left a casserole in the refrigerator for dinner tonight. I thanked her, gratitude welling, for this steadfast neighbor who had become such a crucial support during our crisis. As she departed, Mom called from upstairs. Rebecca, is that you? I found her sitting up in bed, reading glasses perched on her nose and a worn paperback in her hands. Jane Austen's Persuasion, her comfort read during difficult times. The sight was so normal, so reminiscent of countless childhood moments that for a second I could almost forget the surgery looming just days away. "How's Marcus?" she asked as I sat on the edge of her bed. "Improving. The doctors are optimistic he won't need surgery." I gave her a condensed version of the night's events, omitting the more emotional aspects of our conversation. She listened, intently, setting her book aside. "And you spent the night at the hospital?" "In the waiting room," I clarified, though the distinction seemed suddenly insignificant. Her expression was thoughtful but neutral, offering neither judgment nor approval. "What?" I asked, recognizing her teaching face, the one that invited students to expand on their thinking. "I'm just observing that actions often reveal more than words," she said. "You could have left once you knew he was stable. You chose to stay." I sighed, too tired for philosophical discussions about the meaning behind my choices. It seemed like the right thing to do. "Yes," she agreed simply. "It did." After ensuring Mom had everything she needed, I retreated to the guest room and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep that lasted until late afternoon. I woke to the sound of voices downstairs. Jack had arrived with the folder from Marcus's office and was chatting with Mom in the living room. I found them sharing tea, the folder, open on the coffee table between them, its contents spread out in neat piles. Mom looked more animated than she had in days, engaged in what appeared to be strategic planning. "There you are," she said, glancing up as I entered. "Jack has been filling me in on the concert arrangements. There's quite a bit to coordinate." Jack nodded. Marcus had everything meticulously organized, down to the minute-by-minute schedule, but there are a few things that need your input now that he can't be there. I poured myself a cup of tea and joined them, scanning the documents, donor information, program details, media coordination notes, even a seating chart for VIP attendees. The level of thought and preparation evident in these materials spoke volumes about Marcus's commitment to making the event successful. "The high school auditorium holds 650 people," Jack explained, pointing to a venue diagram. "We've already pre-sold nearly 400 tickets and we expect to sell out by Wednesday afternoon. At $30 per ticket, plus donations, we could raise another $25,000 easily." The math was encouraging. Between the foundation grant, the dealership event proceeds, the online campaign, and the projected concert revenue, we were within striking distance of our goal. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully believe we would succeed, not just in funding Mom's surgery, but in proving that a community united could overcome seemingly insurmountable obstacles. As Jack continued explaining various aspects of the concert planning, I noticed Mom watching me with a particular intensity. When Jack stepped out to take a phone call, she leaned toward me. "You look different today," she observed. "Sleep-deprived and unwashed?" I attempted humor, though the joke fell flat. "No." She shook her head slightly. "More present, like you've come back from somewhere far away." Her perception was uncanny. I had been distant in many ways since discovering Marcus's betrayal. Physically, present but emotionally withdrawn, functioning on autopilot while navigating our medical and financial crisis. "I had a real conversation with Marcus this morning," I admitted, "about why he took the money, what he was thinking. It didn't change what happened, but understanding someone's why can shift your perspective," she finished. "Something like that." I hesitated, then continued. "He told me about the $10,000 donation he arranged. It's actually a loan using his car as collateral. Even hospitalized, he's still trying to contribute." Mom absorbed this information thoughtfully. People often try to solve problems using the same patterns that created them. Marcus gambled your savings because he thought one big win could fix everything. Now he's taking on new debt with the same hope. "So nothing's really changed?" The thought was disheartening. I didn't say that. She reached for my hand. "The motivation has changed completely. Before, He acted out of pride and fear, hiding the truth from you. Now he's acting from responsibility and transparency, facing the consequences of his choices head-on. That's significant growth, even if the approach still needs refinement. Her analysis cut to the heart of the matter with characteristic insight. Marcus's methods might still be impulsive, but his underlying intentions had shifted dramatically. The question was whether that shift provided sufficient foundation for rebuilding trust. Jack returned from his call with news that Marcus had been moved from the ICU to a regular room, a positive development that suggested continued improvement. The doctors are saying he might be discharged as early as Tuesday, though he'll need someone to stay with him initially. The implied question hung in the air. Would that someone be me? The prospect of Marcus returning to our apartment alone, injured and requiring assistance, added another layer of complexity to our already complicated situation. Before I could formulate a response, Mom spoke up. He's welcome to recover here, if that would help. We have the spare room, and since I'll be in the hospital by then, the timing works out. The suggestion caught me off guard. Mom, you don't have to. I know I don't have to, she interrupted gently. I want to. This house has always been a place of healing, whether it was your scraped knees as a child or your father's last months. Besides, she added with a small smile, it would give you both some neutral territory to figure things out. Her generosity, offering her home as sanctuary to the man whose actions had jeopardized her life, humbled me deeply. In that moment, I glimpsed what her students must have seen throughout her teaching career. A woman whose capacity for compassion transcended conventional boundaries, who could separate actions from intentions and offer second chances without minimizing accountability. As Jack departed with promises to handle the remaining concert logistics, I found myself standing at another crossroads. The path forward remained uncertain, filled with medical challenges, emotional hurdles, and relationship questions that had no easy answers. Yet something had shifted in the atmosphere, a sense that even if the journey ahead proved difficult, we wouldn't be traveling alone. Mom's surgery, Marcus's recovery, my own healing process. These parallel paths were converging in unexpected ways, creating a tapestry more complex and potentially more beautiful than any of us could have anticipated when this crisis began. The next few days would be crucial, testing our collective strength and resilience. But for perhaps the first time since that terrible night when I discovered our savings gone, I felt truly present in the moment, anchored by something stronger than fear or anger. It was hope, not the naive optimism that ignores difficulty, but the hard-won conviction that emerges from looking directly at life's harshest realities and choosing to move forward anyway, step by careful step, supported by those who walk beside us on the journey. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.